Well, welcome audience to the next session, Modern Sales Pros Revenue Excellence Summit. This topic is called marketing's role in revenue planning. So marketing does have a piece in revenue planning, despite us not being the salespeople. So in this topic, we're going to talk a little bit about how to build demand and what we're thinking about and what's different about 2025. So with that, I'll quickly introduce myself. I'm Allison Murdoch. I'm the founder of Trusted CMO. And my esteemed colleagues, I will let them introduce themselves, starting with Sarah.
Thank you, Allison. Hi, everyone. My name's Sarah McConnell. I'm the VP of Demand Generation at Qualified. I've been here almost 5 years now, which, gosh, feels like a lifetime. So my whole job is focused on driving pipeline for our sales team. So obviously, I'm excited to have chat about everything here, especially as it pertains to sales and how to work with marketing, because that is a majority of my job.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Alex.
Hey, Modern Sales Pro. I'm Alex Krakow. I'm the CEO and co-founder of this company called Doc. Been building for 3 years. We're like a client-facing workspace, so you can use it for as a sales deal room, customer onboarding, or account management. And before this, I used to run marketing at a company called Lattice. So I joined there as a third employee, ran marketing there for 5 years, and learned a ton along the way. So excited to be here.
Great. Hey, Ashley.
Happy to be here. Ashley Stepien. I lead marketing and growth at a company called Hex. Prior to that, I've been at companies including Ramp, Webflow, Marketo, Pendo, always with a stint towards driving revenue. So looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. Well, I'm so excited to be here with all of you. You guys are such pros. And this is a really important topic because demand generation, just my own opinion, in the last few years has been hotly debated as a term. And my point of view is demand generation is so much more than you even think it is. It's almost hard for people to wrap their heads around. So they go to growth and they go to something revenue marketing, even though, Ashley, that was your title. So I think with this is, we're looking at what goes into demand generation. So on that note, one of the first topics we're going to cover is how to craft campaigns that really fuel sales pipelines. So how do you design them, execute them, talk about them, get your sales team excited about them? And that is the first topic today. So I'm going to turn over the commentary to Sarah first to talk a little bit about what they do at Qualified and some of the pieces that are good and bad.
Yeah, I love this topic as it pertains to campaigns because you, I think, hit it right on the head, Allison, where you said it has to involve sales. And I think so frequently marketing can get caught up in our own little ecosystem and start running campaigns that we think are going to be fabulous, but we don't bring sales along for the ride. And then when the campaign isn't successful and we can't figure out why, it's typically that disconnect. So I've found a few things that have been beneficial as I've thought about campaigns at different organizations, especially at Qualified. One of the first thing that just seems so incredibly simple, but my CEO, Craig, he was a CMO at Salesforce, and he has just hounded it into my head, is every large campaign that is integrated and encompasses marketing and sales, which they should, is there has to be a common nomenclature that you're using for that campaign. So your entire team should know when you say, oh, we're talking about XYZ campaign, give it a name and use it consistently so that everyone at the company knows exactly what you're talking about. And I remember having these early conversations with Craig, and I'm like, that seems so simple. And like, why would we do that? But then I found over time, it helped pick up speed within the organization so much faster, and people were able to talk about it with some commonality. So again, it's like a simple piece of advice, but if you're running a large campaign, what are you naming that campaign? Like, what if you're going to talk to about someone on the ops team or the CS team or the sales team? They should all know the name of that campaign and be able to, at least to a certain extent, articulate the goal of it and what you're trying to do. So that's one of them. And the second one I would say that I found is just bringing sales along for the ride. You kind of talked about this. I've tried to run campaigns in the past where I'm like, hey, I used to, I sunlight or moonlight in ops or work in ops a little bit. And I'm like, I have all the data I need. I can tell you what accounts we should be targeting. I know the personas we should be targeting because I've got all that data and I can go find it. So I found though that if I went to my sales team and said, here's your target account list and here's who we're targeting and this is exactly who we're going to spend time and money on, they always had opinions, and they were right opinions. They would typically come and say, well, I've talked to those accounts. I have insider knowledge on those accounts and how they're performing. And, I just talked to one of them last week and they don't have budget right now. Now, from my perspective, I'm looking at the data and I'm like, well, they match all the ICP. They've got all the things that we need. This is definitely, they're showing signals of intent. Why would we not be targeting these? So what I found useful is if you're doing a campaign, especially if it's an ABM campaign where there's accounts that you're going after, is creating a larger list, maybe going, 15 to 20% larger than what you end up wanting to spend from a budgetary perspective, handing it over to sales leaders or AEs or whoever, depending on your org size, is the right person, and letting them give input. So coming into that account and leave comments and saying, I don't want to focus on this account. It's in my patch, but for whatever reason, it's not a focus for us right now. And doing that up front and letting them have that input, then later on had them so much more bought into the concept. So then when I come and say, hey, you helped handpick these accounts. You've told me these are top priority. Marketing's run ads. We have events we're inviting them to, but hey, sales, we need your help. We need you to invite them to these events. We need you to do some outreach to them. We've helped write some of that outreach. They're so much more willing to work with you when they feel like they've had that input, I've found, into the list.
Yeah, I think having the input and also being informed at that during the process. Ashley, any thoughts or any new novel approaches that you will advocate for?
I think plus one to what Sarah said, but I think there's also just two other things I would add. As it comes to partnering with the sales team, like carrot and stick. So I'm big on rewarding the behaviors that I like to see. For instance, we had a rep who's just been like crushing it and leaning in so heavily with everything that we've been doing. We're rewarding her by doing an event in her geo that she wants to run with the content she wants to run. We're building it for her and, holding her up as an example of what we can do when you meet us halfway. So that's the first thing. The second thing I'll say is I worry so much of the art of marketing has been lost. And I am more guilty of that than anybody in getting like metrics obsessed. And so I really, the last couple of companies, including Webflow and Ramp and now Hex, I'm trying to like recapture the art of the campaign and the message and the audience and just kind of the love of what we're trying to do. And I have found in doing that, my reps get really excited about that. They get excited about the messaging. So I'm actually trying to take more of an angle of marketing to my B2B buyers, more like consumers. And playful and the reps get really freaking excited about a different kind of campaign that is artful and enjoyable. And so I think it's everybody kind of wins when you put the art back into the marketing.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I personally think creativity and brand are back because we've been so numbers driven and, people love stories and the reps, that's what they do. They talk to people. So they need to hear the words and they need to feel like this is something that's exciting and building. That's a great tip, Ashley. What about you, Alex? What you wear a couple hats, or you've worn CMO, CEO. You probably have a unique opinion on this.
I totally agree with Ashley. Like the art of marketing has been lost, and like we are way too numbers focused as a marketing organization. Like the sort of the worst campaigns I feel like I ran at Lattice were Google AdWords that were just signing up like crappy accounts and a lot of spammy clicks, right? And some of the best things that we did were these big brand splashes, whether it was billboards or sending out all these mugs to people or filming commercials and sending it out. And I think the way I think about it is you want to hype up the sales team. And a lot of what it comes down to as a marketing leader is you need to get the sales team super excited to follow up on the leads and to participate in the campaign. And if you're just running like the old school playbook of like, hey, here's this ebook that no one actually wants to read, and you need to follow up on the leads from that ebook, like that's not going to work, right? And you need to do things that are like fun and sexy. And I think a lot of that, comes down to Ashley's point, the creativity and actually what's in the offer, right? And like, a simple thing we would do at Lattice is invite people to like really fancy dinners, and it wasn't a dinner at like a crappy happy hour or something like that. We would take them to like Foreign Cinema or something in San Francisco, which is like a nice restaurant. And of course the sales team would be super excited to invite folks to that. And so I think it's so much about like the offer and the creativity creativity about what you're putting in front of the sales team. And then it just comes down to over communicating. Like I would join the sales team all hands to hype them up and to talk about it and to get people excited. I would like walk around the sales team desks and be like, hey, isn't this fun? Like, aren't we doing this? And then get feedback from them about how do we sort of make it better and more engaging. So that's how I think about it.
This is great commentary. I mean, as you all are speaking, I'm thinking we got to make it a thing for sales to be proud of, that they're like, oh, I saw our billboard, I know qualified, Sarah, you're running billboard, and they feel like, oh, that's us, and they're proud to like maybe make that cold call if they have to. But, getting back to sort of the crafting of them, what are there some sort of winning strategies? Maybe I'll go back to you, Alex. Like I'm looking at your amazing background here, by the way. Should talk about that, maybe plug that company, but ways that you've gotten sales excited about campaigns or been inspired to create certain aspects of the campaigns at your company to really get people's attention.
So I think it maybe taking a step back, I think it comes down to like who your buyer is and your overall pipeline plan, right? Like there's so many different types of demand gen strategies that work for, if you're an SMB business, it's very different than if you're, doing enterprise sales. And if you're doing SMB, you're going to rely more on inbound strategies like SEO and ads and people coming to the website. For enterprise, is going to be more ABM. And then everyone's probably somewhere in the middle. And then you're doing this like hybrid approach where it gets really challenging. And so I first would like think through it through that lens is who's your ICP, who you're going after, and then craft your demand gen strategies based off that. But I will assume if most people have a sales team, they're probably working like upper SMB, mid-market, enterprise. And in that world, like I think there's this interesting world of like, I like to think of it as like hybrid ABM. It's probably cheating, but like the best campaign I think I ever ran at Lattice was what we had called this like ABM City campaign, where we basically found 18,000 HR people, put them all into, so we found 18,000 HR people. We got coffee mugs made. I actually got one right here. Got these coffee mugs made and sent out these to 18,000 people.
I love humans, it says.
I love humans. Yeah. And these are like floating around way too much in the world. And so we did that campaign. We sent a bunch of emails. We filmed a commercial. We targeted them with ads. We put up billboards in the cities. We did events, and it was sort of, we went wide with it because it was, we were sort of this mid-market company. But I think that was a good example of this multi-channel campaign that we ran, for the sales team. And worked really closely in partnership with them. We crafted that list of people working with them. There was a tight follow-up approach. We made it a giant company-wide, revenue-wide initiative to, hey, marketing's doing all of this work. Sales, you better follow up on this, right? Like this is part of that.
Did they?
They did.
They were okay. Well, and do you chalk that up for just making it into a thing? That everybody,
you have to make it a thing. Yeah. No, and then like, you got to be a hard ass too. It's like, hey, STR, you got to follow up. It's literally your job to do this. Hey, rep, like it's literally your job to do this. It's not just, like, I don't know why, and then you have to like look at the list and annoy people. And I think that comes down to sales management ultimately, but marketing sort of influencing sales managers and, yelling at the CRO if their team's not, being accountable.
I know Ashley has something to say about this. She said it before, carrot and stick.
Well, yeah, actually, I love the I love humans coffee mug because that has been sort of the mantra that I've been trying to harken back to in the campaigns I've been crafting.
Why is that, Ashley? Just maybe do you want to talk a little bit about yours? You have a very different audience you're marketing to for the first time in a while.
Yeah. Well, I guess at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who you're selling to, it's a human.
Yes.
And I think we really got like lost in our heads the last decade, 15, 20 years of we're selling to a company. And even with a lot of this ABM stuff, like selling to a company, that is right. But if you want to get somebody in the door, it's going to be because you brought a human in the door. And I think we've lost sight of a lot of that in our approaches. We start to use like a lot of mechanical language or buzzwords that just don't necessarily get people excited to talk to you. So the campaigns that I have been running in the last probably 5 years have been more about getting in touch with kind of like the feelings and showing that we truly understand you both as a human and as a professional in the role that you do. I have at Ramp, we were marketing to finance professionals. Like,
Yeah.
not exactly like the most exciting demographic, but actually that's wrong. Like finance professionals tend to be very competitive athletes. They're big runners. They actually tend to be like very competitive outside of their life. They have this whole kind of human side that we were ignoring, I think, as an industry. And so at Ramp, our whole mantra was like the humanity of the finance leader. Like they're actually really clever and funny. They have great sense of humor. They're super well read. Like let's talk to them how they are talking to each other. And so a lot of brand campaigns that are using very simple language that kind of strike to the core of who they are as humans and the pain they're experiencing every day in their job and how they just want to go home and be with their families most of the time. Like how do I into that? And that is enough to kind of get the top of your funnel full easier, right? Once you get them in the door, then it becomes about conversion.
Yes.
It's getting people in the door and rising above the noise that I think is our greatest challenge when we're crafting these campaigns.
100%. That's great. It's a great story, Ashley, because I think that making we it's easy to dismiss that and then instead throw like a pile of features at them. It's really like, why do we even care about them? And
I think there's a world where we've gotten a little myopic in our storytelling versus putting our customers at the center of the story. And even if we think we're putting the customers at the center of their story, we're putting their company at the center, not them. So I think we've got to shift back to that kind of humanity element.
Yes. Jill Rowley, who also did a talk on here, said we have to master the customer. Like we actually have to go back to that and use their words, not, the words that we want them to use. So Sarah, what about you? What's your take on creativity, brand, connecting with humans in your campaigns?
Yeah, I love all these ideas. And I'll say, as far as getting sales excited and bought into them, two things that I found, at least internally, that have worked well. One is sharing small wins. So it's easy, I think, in large campaigns, we've kind of talked about get lost in the data. And we ran a campaign, gosh, it's probably been over a year now, but it was very one-to-one focused. And it was a ton of work for the marketing team where we had a list of like 100 accounts that we knew were like must-win accounts. And we started running ads with like they were very personalized, and we were serving them only to like people at that company. It had the company name. When they came to the website, we had like this full experience pull through, and we market to marketers. So I'm in a unique position where when you do cool advertising or you do cool campaigns, it gets noticed. So a lot of times marketers would reach out to us and say, this is amazing. I've loved this. Simple things like screenshotting that and sharing it in a Slack channel and saying, like, your prospect that you've been trying to reach to just said, this is a great campaign, would get sales really excited and bought into them. I also love the concept that Ashley talked about of rewarding behavior. So I think, rewarding reps, we would invite them to things like events or dinners, or, they want to go to the events. They want to be working the booth. They want to go schmooze with prospects. So trying to reward. And then the last thing that I will say is, Ashley, you mentioned that finance people are really competitive, and obviously salespeople tend to also be very competitive. So making something competitive out of the campaign. So we would do things like build leaderboards. We would do weekly updates of like, how are people, like how many meetings have been booked with them? If we've asked you to register people for events within that campaign, we would do leaderboards with simple things like spiffs. And it didn't have to be something expensive or big, but it was night and day when we started to run these spiffs or like leaderboards against campaigns with our reps. They would start to actually really care because they wanted to win, because they're competitive. So we leaned into that nature and that side of them. We found a lot of success with them really buying into those campaigns and wanting to get involved in them.
That's great. I love it. I want to kind of switch, unless there's more you all want to say on this topic, I want to switch to something a little bit different, or maybe a little higher level, but also strategic for the company. Is when you're coming up with a campaign and you're trying to kind of drive alignment, which at the end of the day is pipeline, wins, even close loss. You can market to them later, but you want to drive some results. I'm curious how you all are one, communicating about expectations, projecting success from a numbers standpoint, and also communicating. So you've talked about that a little bit with your sales counterparts. Hey, I need you guys to do this, do that. But I've noticed that a lot of times in companies, there's a level of communications that's for everyone else at the C-suite, even the CEO, the board. How are you all demonstrating sales and marketing alignment from those standpoints and also forging it? Maybe who wants to start? Ashley, you look like you had a thought.
Yeah. I am big on my bottoms up strategy. So walking into any quarter, 6 weeks before the quarter starts, my team is already building their bottoms up plan to walk into the following quarter, which means I can confidently go into the QBR or to any sort of planning meeting and say, right now I'm projecting to hit 86% of my number. It's coming from here, there, and the other place. This is my gap right now. And the gap is going to be around this particular 2 weeks coming up in November. I'm going to need sales to lean in extra hard to pick up the slack and do outbound in that week. I'm going to pick back up in January with a couple events that we'll over deliver on. So hopefully we'll all get to the same place. So that's the first thing I do is like very, very clear visibility, transparency into my plan walking in. That gives them a lot of confidence that like I'm paying attention. B, I have a little vulnerability when I say like, hey, I need help. Like I'm not going to make this spread. And like,
You're
I
not
need
sugarcoating it.
Yeah, 100%. So they know they can trust me. And then C, it also gives them a chance to kind of weigh in too and be like, hey, that thing that you have planned that week of the quarter, like we have this other thing going on and maybe we can pair them up. So it just kind of gives them a little say in it. And then when we close out the quarter, we can point back at that bottoms up plan and say like, here's how it went relative to how we forecasted and how we predicted it would go. And, here's what we learned along the way. And so it's just about creating that transparency and that dialogue so that they understand, like we're looking at all the same things y'all are looking at. And we've got like a very methodical plan on how we're going to get there. We're not just going to throw a bunch of things at the wall.
And do they come back to you and say the same thing? Well, okay, wait, hold on. In November, such and such as so-and-so is on vacation.
100%. Like, it might be that I'll see outbounding is starting to dip. I'll take some of my budget and I'll dip it into my like growth marketing channels that I know are just levers I can pull at any given time. Like, my cost per lead's probably going to go up a little bit, but if it means I can cover the spread for them to create more top of funnel, like it's all about partnership and kind of leaning in wherever we need it.
Yeah, that's great. Alex, what's your thought on this sort of communication, forecasting, vulnerability?
Totally. I mean, I definitely agree you should be vulnerable, and everything Ashley's saying there around just being like honest around the number. I feel like the worst execs and the people in these meetings are the ones who are trying to sugarcoat it at things. It's like, no, here's the problem. Here's where we want to go about it. And I think alignment honestly just starts at the top, right? Like the marketing leader and the sales leader need to sit down and figure out how they want to drive accountability across the team. One trick we would do at Lattice, we would send this like marketing love sales email like every week, every 2 weeks, something like that. And it basically had like two big sections. One was campaigns, the other was content. And in the campaigns section, it was like, hey, here's the upcoming campaigns. Here's the things that we are planning just to get these on your radar of what we're going to do and start to build kind of like that internal marketing to the sales team about it. But then also here's the campaigns that are currently running or we had run in the past to report back on the results. And that was a place where you could also call people out and say, hey, like, looks like these leads haven't been followed up on yet. We would really need help here. And this is also where, like demand gen managers, on the team were really helpful. Like I would sort of task somebody on the team to go, work with the, the counterpart on the sales side, whether it was like the head of SDR or whoever, to say, hey, let's go follow up on these leads. They haven't been followed up on yet. And like that, marketing should be in there looking at the list, helping, to figure out, okay, where are the gaps? And maybe they're all really bad leads. And that's the reason why. And that's good feedback for the marketing team to refine the campaigns. And that's totally good, but you've got to get those signals. And I think people rely too much on just like the data in Salesforce or HubSpot and the reports. Like you got to go actually talk to the sales reps.
You have to talk to them. You have to look at like the reality versus like a bunch of something that might come from RevOps, which we'll get back to in a second because I have some opinions there. But Sarah, what's your view in terms of communicating, prioritizing, being vulnerable?
Yeah, I think setting expectations early before anything, whether it's a small campaign, a large campaign, any marketing every quarter, kind of Ashley's point, is setting expectations of what the outcome is going to be ahead of time. I've learned this on the hard way, that you'll start a campaign, especially if it's like ABM, and say, oh, we're going to drive X amount of pipeline or leads, and realizing early on that not everything was going to be so easy to tie one-to-one to pipeline. And so setting expectations early with executives on, this is an initiative that's going to help maybe drive more website traffic from our ICP visitors, or move accounts down the funnel, or maybe it's drive leads in pipeline, but setting those expectations early on with what the outcome we want to see from this campaign is. Again, sounds simple, but I think without it being set up front and them knowing, it's easy for them to assume.
I think it doesn't work. Yeah.
And then I would say, yeah, I think that's like the main one there. I would say like setting that expectation early, communicating that with the team. Oh, and then I would say the second one is we have a company-wide all hands every other week, and we present on those to the whole company. So we kind of have this expectation that if you're going to be transparent early on and you're going to spend time and money and marketing effort on a campaign or initiative or whatever it is, you should be able to get up in front of the whole company and report on how it's going. And if you can't, if you don't have the confidence to do that, you don't have the data to do that, it's probably not worth putting time and money into. So continually showing that transparency to the company of like, hey, this is what marketing is working on and why. So we aren't seen as this cost center that's just out there like putting out fluffy content and videos that, hey, like there are consistent initiatives that we're running. Here's the outcome that we're looking for. And we're going to get up in front of the whole company every other week and tell you how it's performing, has helped instill more confidence, I think, across the company and the marketing organization.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And my own experience seeing things like when there are partners involved, for example, and eventually the lead comes in through the channel and then lands on the salesperson's desk, and the result, the original source of that partner discussion was an event. You have to sort out, maybe was the event produced by marketing, but then the partner motion was its own thing, and it's going to take 2 weeks to get to sales. These kinds of things are not inconsequential and require some reporting, because that's where I've seen things fall down, is expectations are just out of whack a bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, Alex, I was going to ask you, in terms of so now you're the CEO of a new company, you've got kind of a different hat on now, but you have deep expertise in marketing. Like, in terms of your perspective, where you sit right now around sales and marketing alignment, any kind of new learnings from your role shift?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And we're still early. So a lot of the like sales and marketing alignment is really just like us talking about it. And like, there's no crazy system.
Like, I hope we have it one day.
Totally. Yeah. Like we have like a 3-person sales team, 1-person marketing. I run around like a crazy person talking to everyone. So it's still early days. I think like one of the things that, sort of actually inspired me to create Doc and sort of the vision behind the company, not to sell, but like, I think like too many marketers are focused just on the top of the funnel. Like everything we've talked about today is just like leads. And that is so important. And like, Jack, the CEO of Lattice, that's all we would talk about. It was just pipeline. But I think you need less leads at the top of the funnel if you do a better job of actually converting your existing leads. And I think, this is probably more product marketing, but I think there's a lot that marketers can do to really, help sales actually in their deal cycles, and to have a better narrative of the content that they're sharing, get more visibility into that. And I think one way you can do that is through like a deal room like Doc. But that was partly the problem I was trying to solve at Lattice, which inspired Doc, was how can we better enable champions, and help the salespeople do that? And how can marketing help sales, help champions? And I think if you can do that better, you need less leads, and you'll have hopefully higher ACVs, better conversion rates, and ultimately more revenue. Because like we all talk about pipeline as a marketing orgs, but ultimately we care about revenue at the end of the day. And so
pipeline's like, yay, that's fun and shiny, except for we just need you guys to close.
Totally, exactly. And so I would always, I would get frustrated by that. And like you build these crazy marketing models every year at Lattice, and it was like, that's impossible to reach that lead number. And it would always kind of work out because we would get to you'd fix the conversion rates. And I think more marketers should focus on that. And that's a great way to partner with sales, because that's what they care about, right? They care about close rate.
Yeah. Commentary, Ashley.
I think I would just kind of +1 everything that he said there. I don't have a lot more to add. I love the perspective of the fact that you've sat in so many different seats too. Yes. I haven't had that luxury. And I just think that's such like a good validation that you've seen it from so many different angles now. And you're able to kind of back up what my experience has been.
Yeah. Well, and just to your point, Ashley, I mean, you've held a lot of, great marketing roles at really solid companies that, have become big things. Doing something right, of course. But, is it, when you think back at all your experiences, was there something you did to really get sales engaged and working with you in a more collaborative way than maybe you had before? It's okay to say no if it's no.
All I can say is just like the emphasis on the relationship and the partnership element of it. It's truly if they know, I'm in the QBRs, they know that I'm in the trenches, they know that I'm looking at the dashboards. I'm losing sleep when they're losing sleep. They just want to know that they've got a partner, and so just doubling down on that partnership and meeting them wherever they are.
Yeah. Yeah. I have my experience with sales, going to a company where there were 3 people in marketing and 30 people in sales that include SDRs. It was so overwhelming. And I think what we did, a lot of you have said, I'm echoing a lot of your experiences. We had a champion who was very underappreciated and made this person feel so good about their role. And part of it was the product that enabled that, but part of it was getting them into a giant room, 500 of them, they were crying, they were hugging, they were this because no one had heard them for years. And that when it comes back to projection, we had a board member who said, well, this event costs so much, it's $500,000. And I said, do you know what the return is? And he's like, no, it just, maybe we should consider reducing it. And I said, the return closed one was $3.5 million. So I don't know, is my math off? And so sometimes you just have to go with, what, like your gut and that creativity and that brand, like this buyer is going to love this. And it's hard to quantify.
On that same kind of topic, it's a little bit of a pivot, but I think modern CEOs or this kind of new generation of CEOs we're starting to see understand those intangible investments. They understand, I think we, again, got obsessed with the ROI element. And because we could get so scientific, I could tell you the exact cost of any given thing that was going to happen. I am trying to wean myself off that drug and get to a place of feeling comfortable with not being obsessed with the ROI. And it's those intangibles, it's those events, it's the brand awareness. And as the kids are saying, it's the running on vibes. That there's some truth there. And I think that gets an entire company fired up, let alone your customer base. So I just think we can't underestimate the power of the vibes.
Yeah. Love that. Running on vibes. So, and Sarah, like, what are you seeing at Qualified? Do you feel like the leadership is running, sees y'all running on vibes, or is it more like, I need hard numbers for how those people were feeling in that room?
So I think it's a little bit of both. I have the luxury of reporting to a CEO who was a CMO, which is a blessing and a curse. A blessing in that he obviously understands marketing is a benefit to the company. A curse in that the expectations of what marketing can do are obviously extremely high, which is great. It pushes us to be better and work harder and really puff up beyond our size. I will say, I love Ashley's points of sometimes you do things because it's going to make an impact that's going to be hard to quantify. Allison, you mentioned our billboards. That was kind of doing them in the Bay Area. And we're going to take a swing at this. Measuring billboards is hard. I could set up a bunch of dashboards and tell you I increased traffic in this metro area and blah. But is it really going to make a difference? At a certain point, it is. We think people are going to get excited about this and see it. And we kind of have to go with the vibes of are people messaging us? I set up gong trackers of, do we hear the word billboard mentioned? I can do all of that. But sometimes your execs are oh, that was cool. Great. That's all I need to hear.
Yeah. Sales feels good about it and make more calls as a result or something. Yeah.
And then the other thing I would say as far as marketing and sales alignment that, Alex, you talked about, and Ashley, and how can we get closer aligned with sales? I know the audience listening to this is predominantly sales. I'm obviously on the marketing side. One thing I found so beneficial to help drive that alignment is, one, I'm always an open ears to our sales team. If you have feedback on something, even if I disagree with it, even if my knee-jerk response is, well, you're not a marketer, you don't know, like I will always hear you out and hear your opinions. But on the flip side, the expectation I like to hold my sales leadership to is, tell me what you need. Coming to me and saying like, I don't like this, I don't have enough pipeline. Great. But if you can come to me and say, and if I usually my response is, what can I do to make your life easier? What can I provide to you? What are you missing in the field? What do you need? And if the answer is, I don't know, then that's not a really beneficial conversation. But if you as a salesperson could go to your marketers and say, I've noticed we have a gap in this, or in the field, I'm hearing my sellers say they're running into this problem. That's a solution I can go find. I can go fix that for you, and I can go work towards it and say, hey, I'm partnering with you to go fix this problem. But if your response is just, I need more leads in pipeline, but I don't know what's not working, that's not going to lead to any sort of.
Well, and I would say, go look at that pool sitting somewhere in Salesforce that haven't been worked in 6 months and start there, so not to be rude or anything, but come on, that's where the collaboration is important. I think you're reminding me of something too, that speaking of the dead zone, according to Latney, I found that, that middle, if you're selling to enterprise, that sort of middle part where, excitement, maybe a contract is put in front of them, but they just sit there in the middle. And that's where I find that sales comes in and goes, oh, well, I need more leads. I'm like, but what about the middle? So do you guys have any strategies? And we're going to quickly switch to the measurement part in just a second, but any strategies to fix the middle?
I think mine, keeping it short, I think this is an area of opportunity for AI. I think leads can often just get left unworked, and it's a capacity problem. It's not usually that reps don't want to work them. It's that there's a capacity problem and their minds are elsewhere, and they're going to focus on the lowest hanging fruit that they know can turn into revenue. And I get it. Like, why would you work deals that are going to be a little bit harder if you feel like you don't have time? And on the flip side, marketing doesn't also have bandwidth or resources to work those. So I do think we're starting to hear a lot more about AI and the ability to nurture these leads in a really personalized and effective way to help make sales jobs easier, get those leads more warm until they're like meeting ready, and also making marketing's job easier, that they're not having to build these like rigid nurture sequences. So without going into too much detail, I think there's opportunity there because it is just a human bandwidth issue at this point.
Yeah, it got it. And what about Alex? Are you using AI at all for this type of exercise?
Not yet, but maybe soon. Maybe soon. I don't trust. We're an early stage startup. I don't trust the data that we got, to have our AI SDRs going crazy.
Yeah.
But the way I think about kind of this, like people who are not ready to buy quite yet, is like the job there is not to actually sell them on your product. It's just to provide value in some way, and that can be inviting them to a nice dinner, to go out, to go talk. At Lattice, a big thing we would do was we had this like resources for human Slack community where they could go connect and network with other folks. And so if anybody ever said no to us, if we weren't like in a position to buy yet, we would sort of invite them into a place where they could go learn and talk to other, HR leaders. And so, like I think of it oftentimes that we try and force our product down people's throats a little bit too much. And it's more like just be a helpful person, and then they will think of you when the time is right. And that's marketing's job, right? It's your job is just to be part of the consideration set when they're thinking of buying the purchase. And it's kind of sales' job to increase the urgency, and then set up a bunch of annoying retargeting ads so they see you everywhere. That also helps.
Well, and I would just say, I posted about this on LinkedIn that a similar company I was talking to, what won the deal for us wasn't features with the closest competitor. It was actually how our salespeople acted. They were like, we just like you guys better. Like, oh, that's sad. Or we were more helpful. So that is the thing. Ashley, in terms of AI and solving the dead zone problem with, anything you're doing there?
So the way that I set up my growth function is into 3 pods, which is acquisition, monetization, and retention. And the people in those pods will be product people, they'll be growth marketers, and they might be from other functions as well. So when we look at that dead zone, as you call it, like that's my monetization pod. They're not worried about bringing people in the door. They're worried about monetizing them. And so they are kind of obsessively looking at people at that stage in the life cycle across every single channel, whether it's through the product, whether it's through retargeting, whether it's through events, messaging, lifecycle marketing, whatever it might be. And they are constantly experimenting. They are playing incessantly. So like one example would be, we just recently put up a retargeting campaign to request a demo. And we did one where it was watch the gated demo pre-recorded versus talk to a salesperson. And with the assumption, the hypothesis was people at this stage may be too uncomfortable to talk to a human, but they are still curious. And we believed that if we ran a recorded webinar behind a gate, that people would engage more heavily. And it was like 80% to 20%, just in terms of the people clicking through on that stuff. So we knew this recorded webinar had legs, and we can engage people in a more gentle way to nudge them along before that sales touch came.
I just heard a stat today that 85 for newly released 85% of buyers have already made up their minds about the sales, and they really don't want to talk to sales. So you had a good hunch, and I think I might have repeated myself because I might have said that earlier, but I'm just, again, for emphasis. So that's great. In terms of at least proving the point that that is the case, and maybe getting investment for a proper product for if you need that, at some point. So I want to switch gears quickly as we start to wrap up around sort of the revenue reporting operational piece. I don't know what your companies are like, but at many companies I work with, revenue ops is its own, it's great, their own department. But I also kind of get concerned with that because I've experienced that sometimes the numbers people don't understand the practice and the art of marketing and why engagement metrics and even the MQLs, even though we kind of don't love them anymore, are important. What are your feelings in terms of reporting generally, and how is that useful to your relationship with sales and showing traction? Maybe I'll start with you, Ashley.
I have real strong opinions on
Good, share.
I have been in two companies where the RevOps was a centralized function, and they really acted more as like mercenaries. And then I've been in two companies where they were nested into my org. And I used to be like hardcore. If they were in my org, I didn't want them because I was so tired of training the mercenaries and getting them to care and like feel the pain that I felt. I've eased up on that a little bit, and maybe that's just like got tired of the, but I basically forced them all to act like they live in my org is what I learned. It didn't matter where they lived, or I forced them to attend all of my team meetings. I forced them to have the accountability in my scorecards. I forced them to speak on my meetings and talk about how we're performing so that I knew they understood the metrics. It's just driving that accountability that whether they like it or not, they're part of the marketing org. So welcome. And I've kind of just taken that approach. And in doing so, I think I've converted a lot of people to believing that like that specialization is important. But I don't know. It's a good fight. I'm going to keep fighting.
Good. I like it. And how about you, Sarah? You said you dabbled in operations here and there, but what's your opinion about reporting and your accountability for pipeline and so forth?
Yeah, I agree with Ashley. I see use cases for both RevOps being centralized in its own organization versus rolling up under marketing. The one thing I will say, as far as just like metrics go, and knowing we're wrapping up on time here, my philosophy is, as someone who loves data and spends a lot of time in it, is if the data that you're asking for wouldn't inform any decisions, why pull it? Like, it's so easy to overload your team and yourself and your sales team with all these metrics and like measure everything, because we can now. We have the tech for it. We've got everything we need to do it. But if that number or that metric you're pulling wouldn't change a decision or wouldn't influence a change one way or the other, don't waste your time. And I've definitely oscillated from one side to the other, where I used to pull all the data and I loved it and lived in it and breathed it, to now I'm like, I don't need all that, because it's not changing anything. It's not changing any behavior or decision making. So there's no point.
Yeah, interesting. Alex, how are you feeling about it? You're at a startup. You're like, oh, do we really have to do this on
Yeah,
Friday?
you're talking to the RevOps guy, which is
Yeah.
funny. Like running all of the RevOps myself now.
Yeah.
So I try to keep it pretty lean.
Yes.
But like I guess maybe somewhat interesting take is that Doc is fairly PLG, and so it's my first time
Right.
doing a PLG product, and so now we have like kind of different types of data sources, right? We have marketing website data, we have our marketing like campaigns and things we're running, and then we also have our product data, and so getting that all into a unified place that's actually useful for the sales team, because we're trying to avoid the MQL thing, but it's more like, where's
Yes.
the intent? What are people engaging with? Surfacing that has been sort of an interesting challenge. And so that's something like that I think has really, evolved. Whereas at like Lattice, it was more, okay, here's the MQLs, we had our scoring, it was more of a traditional system. And now it's more of this like hybrid approach. Yeah. So, and there's not a lot of reporting. I just have to convince myself that the campaign's worth it.
Yeah, I kind of, my favorite saying on this is I can read the news. I want to know the story, so to Sarah's point, what's looking really good versus something needs attention. I don't need to look at a sea of numbers and plus mine, okay, week to week. It's gonna vary. Well, with that, we are gonna wrap up this conversation. Thank you so much for taking part today and talking about this really important topic. I hope we didn't offend our sales counterparts. I'm sure if anything, we got them to like us more or understand what we do. So thank you all for joining us and for taking part in the event.